We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those simple words are our starting point as Americans. They describe not only the foundation of our government, but the substance of our common creed. Not every American may be able to recite them. Few, if asked, could trace the genesis of the Declaration of Independence to its roots in 18th century liberal and Republican thought. But the essential idea behind the declaration that we are born into this world free, all of us, that each of us arrives with a bundle of rights that can't be taken away by any person or any state without just cause, that through our own agency we can and must make of our lives what we will, is one that every American understands. It orients us, sets our course each and every day. Indeed, the value of individual freedom is so deeply ingrained in us that we tend to take it for granted. It is easy to forget that at the time of our nation's founding, this idea was entirely radical in its implications, as radical as Martin Luther's posting on the church door. It is an idea that some portion of the world still rejects, and for which an even larger portion of humanity finds scant evidence in their daily lives. In fact, much of my appreciation of our Bill of Rights comes from having spent part of my childhood in Indonesia and from still having family in Kenya, countries where individual rights are almost entirely subject to the self-restraint of army generals or the whims of corrupt bureaucrats. I remember the first time I took Michelle to Kenya shortly before we were married. As an African American, Michelle was bursting with excitement about the idea of visiting the continent of her ancestors, and we had a wonderful time visiting my grandmother upcountry, wandering through the streets of Nairobi, camping in the Serengeti, fishing off the island of Lamu. But during our travels, Michelle also heard, as I had heard during my first trip to Africa, the terrible sense on the part of most Kenyans that their fates were not their own. My cousins told her how difficult it was to find a job or start their own businesses without paying bribes. Activists told us about being jailed for expressing their opposition to government policies. Even within my own family, Michelle saw how suffocating the demands of family ties and tribal loyalties could be, with distant cousins constantly asking for favors, uncles and aunts showing up unannounced. On the flight back to Chicago, Michelle admitted she was looking forward to getting home. "I never realized just how American I was," she said. She hadn't realized just how free she was or how much she cherished that freedom. At its most elemental level, we understand our liberty in a negative sense. As a general rule, we believe in the right to be left alone and are suspicious of those, whether big brother or nosy neighbors who want to meddle in our business. But we understand our liberty in a more positive sense as well, in the idea of opportunity and the subsidiary values that help realize opportunity. All those homespun virtues that Benjamin Franklin first popularized in Poor Richard's Almanac, and that have continued to inspire our allegiance through successive generations. The values of self-reliance and self-improvement and risk-taking, the values of drive, discipline, temperance, and hard work, the values of thrift and personal responsibility, These values are rooted in a basic optimism about life and a faith in free will, a confidence that through pluck and sweat and smarts, each of us can rise above the circumstances of our birth. But these values also express a broader confidence that so long as individual men and women are free to pursue their own interests, society as a whole will prosper. Our system of self-government and our free market economy depend on the majority of individual Americans adhering to these values. The legitimacy of our government and our economy depend on the degree to which these values are rewarded, which is why the values of equal opportunity and non-discrimination complement rather than impinge on our liberty. If we Americans are individualistic at heart, if we instinctively chafe against the past of tribal allegiances, traditions, customs, and castes, it would be a mistake to assume that this is all we are. Our individualism has always been bound by a set of communal values, the glue upon which every healthy society depends. We value the imperatives of family and the cross-generational obligations that family implies. We value community, the neighborliness that expresses itself through raising the barn or coaching the soccer team. We value patriotism and the obligations of citizenship, a sense of duty and sacrifice on behalf of our nation. We value a faith in something bigger than ourselves, whether that something expresses itself in formal religion or ethical precepts. And we value the constellation of behaviors that express our mutual regard for one another: honesty, fairness, humility, kindness, courtesy, and compassion. In every society and in every individual, these twin strands, the individualistic and the communal, autonomy and solidarity, are in tension, and it has been one of the blessings of America that the circumstances of our nation's birth allowed us to negotiate these tensions better than most. We did not have to go through any of the violent upheavals that Europe was forced to endure as it shed its feudal past. Our passage from an agricultural to an industrial society was eased by the sheer size of the continent, vast tracts of land, and abundant resources that allowed new immigrants to continually remake themselves. But we cannot avoid these tensions entirely. At times our values collide because in the hands of men, each one is subject to distortion and excess. Self-reliance and independence can transform into selfishness and license, ambition into greed, and a frantic desire to succeed at any cost. More than once in our history, we've seen patriotism slide into jingoism, xenophobia, the stifling of dissent. We've seen faith calcify into self-righteousness, closed-mindedness, and cruelty toward others. Even the impulse toward charity can drift into a stifling paternalism, an unwillingness to acknowledge the ability of others to do for themselves.